I'm Keith Becker, the president of Dee Dee's Rentals, and I've been a property manager for more than 20 years. I say this not to brag, but to put into perspective the experience that I have, the recognition of circumstances affecting the industry, and the scale of what I believe to be one of the most challenging issues that I and we are addressing in the last 20 years. Those of you who know me well realize that there are times when basically I work best by giving analogies and examples in order to try to make sense of a fairly complicated situation. So let's do the same in this instance, in pop culture. In 1982, there were two movies that came out. One of them, Sophie's Choice, with Meryl Streep. Sophie was a Polish mother who was in Auschwitz and was given the opportunity to save the life of her son or her daughter, but not both. Also in 1982 was Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, with the quote from Spock, "The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few." And that same movie actually refers to the Kobayashi Maru. Now, the Kobayashi Maru was actually a puzzle. It was a test for which there is presumably no possible solution. Starting to get a sense of where I'm going here. The last item before we get to the crux of the matter is Google this. University of Maryland Psychology Extra Credit Question. A University of Maryland professor has been on his tests for his students putting an extra credit question, and the context of the question is, dear students, each one of you has the choice to choose points, extra points on your test. You can choose either 2 points or you can choose 6 points. But there's a catch. If more than 10% of the class chooses 6 points, nobody gets anything. So what you start having to consider as one of the students in this class is, what will everyone else do? Now, imagine you've got 100 students in the class and 9 of them choose 6 points, but 91 of them choose 2 points. Guess what? Everybody gets extra points. Most everybody gets 2 points, but 9 people get 6. 99 people choose 2 and 1 person chooses 6. Still works. Everybody chooses 2, still works. Since 2008, when he started putting that question on his exams, he's only given out extra credit once. Because invariably, and there's a psychological reason for this, invariably everyone, independent of other factors, not everyone, but a large number, chooses the 6 points. Now, what does this have to do with anything? Sonoma County in particular, and actually throughout California, we are dealing with a housing shortage. The housing shortage basically is caused because our market values, both rent and sale values, are increasing dramatically. They are increasing much faster than housing stock, and they are increasing much faster than employee wages. In Santa Rosa and in Sonoma County, our inventory and our home values have increased. Between 2012 and 2015, they increased effectively 30% in 3 years. And my concern basically and my belief is that this year it's increasing even more and more rapidly. In Healdsburg, it's very similar. And as a matter of fact, Healdsburg is one of those communities where the sale values are not compared to anywhere else in Sonoma County. As a matter of fact, if you want to look at sale values and you compare Healdsburg to Vail or Breckenridge or Martha's Vineyard, it is a destination location, and as a result, the prices are escalating rapidly, both for sale and for rental. Now, as these prices have been escalating, owners have been raising rents. And the fact is, between the year 2000 itself and 2010, for a great measure, rent values were flat. There were very few rent increases. And as a matter of fact, many owners did not catch up in 2012, 13, 14. Only now are many owners starting to realize, oh my word, I have to adjust. And given the acceleration of the last couple of months, last couple of years, those oh my word, I have to adjust are becoming factors of 10, 15, 20% increases. And decisions, impressions are made by individuals who on their own wind up influencing public opinion. In Santa Rosa, late last year, somebody bought a 10-unit building on Hohen Avenue in Bennett Valley. And one of the first things they did was they came in and they increased the rent on all of the residents by 50%. Yes, the properties had been artificially low as far as the rent values. The problem was, however, that the condition of those individual properties was such that there were problems that would almost constitute habitability. The end result was that there wound up being a class action suit from all of those tenants and their tenant advocacy attorney against the new owner of the property. The new owner became a poster child for bad landlord behavior. In Healdsburg, a similar situation happened where an investor bought a 21-unit building, evicted all the tenants, put out a prospectus to potential investors saying, we are going to turn this property, and after we are done, we are going to be able to appeal to a more refined clientele in line with Healdsburg's high quality level of living. It was insulting. People took offense. People thought it was basically, there was a certain sense of racism involved because the people who'd been evicted from this complex were themselves, they'd lived there for 15 years or more. Many of them are Hispanic. Many of them worked in agriculture. Many of them worked providing the resources, the support to make Healdsburg tick. These types of characters unfortunately become the public face of who we, presumably as landlords, are. And as a result, there is pressure being put on different city councils in Healdsburg, in Santa Rosa, to do something. Santa Rosa has established their agenda for the next coming 12 months. On June 9th of this year, an emergency notice was given for a 24-hour notice. On June 10th, there would be an emergency meeting of the Santa Rosa City Council. And the purpose of that emergency meeting was to institute a rent moratorium, basically freezing rents across the board for all properties, and it would be for 45 days. The way the law works, the 45 days could become 60 days, could become 6 months, could become 1 year. And the purpose of this freeze was to allow Santa Rosa City Council time to calculate a more wide-ranging, permanent, comprehensive solution to the rent housing shortage. The worry is that, okay, that goes into effect, it stays in effect for a year. At the other end, there'll be something. There would be something. Rent control, mandatory acceptance of HUD, rent moratoriums, things that basically become very oppressive to property owners. Things that make it very difficult for property owners to own, operate, maintain housing stock as an investment, housing stock as a necessary component of our local economy. Healdsburg, all of 3 months ago or less, really had no intention of taking any significant action to really involve themselves as elected officials in the housing situation in Healdsburg. But in the course of the last 45 days, their opinion has changed, and changed dramatically. How serious could this become? Richmond, on the 21st of June, at the City Council meeting on the 21st of June, they passed a rent control ordinance. Now, Costa-Hawkins Act, which is a law in California, limits the properties that actually could be addressed, could be impacted by rent control. And there are limits to what properties would be able to be locked into a rent control ordinance. However, the law, as it was passed in Richmond, basically said rent control goes into effect as of December 2015. The date that rent control and the value of each property will be determined as of June 21st, 2015. In other words, even though it takes them 5 months to get this up and running, whatever your rent was as of the day of that meeting, you're locked in. Not only that, but because they're instituting rent control, it is going to result in a $2.2 million bureaucracy in the city of Richmond, and the way it was written states that the cost of this $2.2 million bureaucracy is going to be passed on to all owners, whether or not you are protected by Costa-Hawkins or not. I did the numbers and basically depended upon calculating the number of rental properties there are in Richmond and this $2.2 million budget, and do presume it will increase. That's $102 per unit per year for the very first year. It is you as an owner of investment properties in Richmond. How bad could it get? That's the type of thing that basically can knock your socks off. Is it possible? Is it likely that that's going to happen in Santa Rosa? Is it likely that it's going to happen in Healdsburg? Is it likely that it's going to happen in Sonoma County? I'm not sure. I don't believe that the city councils in either Santa Rosa or in Healdsburg are quite that radicalized. But at the same time, if you, as my client, were to ask me, Keith, what do I do? I'm hard-pressed to give you an answer, because the fact is there is no one right answer. It's the Kobayashi Maru. There almost isn't a right answer. Remember that psychology professor, okay? The fact is, if enough people raise their rents now by such an extent, it could force the institution of rent control. If you, as an individual, don't raise your rents, but other people, beyond your own personal choice, other people are doing so, you could find yourself with a situation where you've got a property that's undervalued and you are still locked in to a situation where rent control, if it goes into effect, it's going to be there for a generation or more. It will permanently change the way we do business in Sonoma County. Why is there no one right answer? I've got an owner who actually has properties in Healdsburg, and we had this conversation, and the owner of that property said, you know what? My personal finances, the ownership I have of this asset, and the asset is ultimately like 16 doors, 16 units, and they're able to say, I can accept a pricing on my units that would constitute affordable income for the residents who live there. When one of those properties comes vacant, we will reestablish it at present fair market value. But in the meantime, let's keep a moderate calculation of what the rents are worth. Some of the properties haven't gotten rent increases in years. Some of them got moderate, and I mean moderate, rent increases. On the other hand, I've got another owner whose circumstances are extraordinary. The fact is that they own 3 properties in Santa Rosa, and they barely break even. As a matter of fact, they are on this side, okay? They're into the red. With an increase, now, and bear in mind, let's just say, if the property is presently renting for $1,800, if it were vacant, it would be worth $2,400. And the owner is saying, okay, so let's go somewhere in between. That still winds up with those tenants. If we were to get that somewhere in between, you're still looking at an increase of 16 or 17%. But for this particular owner, that is a necessary calculation, because the fact is that in order for the owner to be able to maintain the properties, keep the ownership of the properties, she has to do something. Not only that, the owner is herself renting. She can't even afford to move into one of her properties because of the way it pencils out. And then, of course, you've got tenants who say, well, if you can't afford to own investment property, then you should sell. Fine, do the math. This owner sells her 3 properties. Those 3 properties wind up going to somebody who decides that they're going to move into each one of those properties. 3 different owners, they move into them. The tenant still gets notice to vacate, and those tenants still find themselves looking for a replacement property at today's fair market value. And remember, if I said today's fair market value is $2,400, they're still caught in the crunch. What is the answer? There is no perfect answer. What can you do? If you're one of my clients, call me. If you're one of my tenants, call me. If you're an investor and don't do business with DD's Rentals, still call me. This is one of the defining issues of our day right now. It is going to change the way we do business in Sonoma County, if not navigated precisely. What else can you do? Get involved. One of the greatest organizations that are actually advocating for landlords and for reasonable and moderate approach to our housing circumstances is the California Apartment Association. As a matter of fact, the CCRM designation that you see on my business card after my name is actually one of the indicators of my involvement with this organization. The California Apartment Association is fighting this battle. And they're not necessarily looking to get one over on the tenants on behalf of owners. They are looking for a moderate and reasonable solution to housing shortages. Get involved with CAA. Contribute to the CAA Political Action Committee. They're working on your behalf, but basically this is a big battle. It is happening all over California. But you don't necessarily care about California per se. What you care about is what's in your backyard. How does this affect you? How does this affect your pocketbook? This situation is going to determine what the rental market in Sonoma County will look like for the next 15 or more years. And it is changing. It is changing rapidly. One of the deciding votes in the Richmond City Council vote changed his mind in a period of 72 hours. And that was the trigger that put rent control into effect with all of its prohibitions and restrictive ordinances. That's one of the means by which it went into effect the way it did. It's very serious. It's very important. Your awareness, your participation, your support is going to be critical in helping us navigate this. And your personal decision, I can only tell you, what you do personally has to be what makes most sense to you. If I'm your property manager managing your residence, I have a fiduciary responsibility to take care of you. But it does become a challenge, taking care of you short term versus taking care of you long term. It's the Kobayashi Maru. There are no easy answers. But honestly, I'm here to help.